A freestyle approach, I don't think serves us as a country.
The proof is in the pudding, just going to meet someone, one would have to see, what matters is outcome.
The Prime Minister always encourages premiers and ministers to go down and continue to work with our colleagues south of the border, no matter if it's a governor, a senator, or congresspeople, or part of the administration. I think we have to continue on with the pressure. So the more people that can get down there and have a conversation, all the power to you.
Reaction there to Conservative MP Jamil Jivani's solo trade mission to Washington. Jivani arrived in D.C. this week, a trip he says is aimed at improving Canada-U.S. trade relations. Reports say he's met with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Vice President J.D. Vance, and his wife, Usha Vance. Jivani and the Vice President are longtime friends, having gone to Yale Law School together. However, his office would not confirm to CTV News whether these meetings did take place or who he has met with while in Washington. Mr. Jivani did post on X that he had, quote, productive meetings with the White House and State Department yesterday, and that the president asked him to pass along a message. Tell the Canadians I love them. And just in the last hour or so, he has posted this on X.
Where I've been having some very productive, promising, and positive conversations with the White House, with the State Department, with senators representing border states that we do a lot of business with in Canada. And I got to tell you, I'm feeling hopeful and optimistic that we can get something really good done for Canadian workers and businesses.
Our front bench is here to talk about that. With me in studio, former BC Premier Christy Clark. She's a senior advisor with Bennett Jones. Marco Mendicino is former Chief of Staff to Prime Minister Mark Carney and a former Liberal cabinet minister. He's now a senior counsel and strategic advisor for Castles. CTV political analyst and former Conservative Industry Minister James Moore is with us. He's now a policy advisor at Edelman. And rounding us out this evening, former federal Conservative cabinet minister and MP Monty Solberg. He's the CEO of New West Public Affairs. Hi, everybody. Happy Thursday. Christy, glad to see you here. I'll start with you. We had James in studio a few days ago, but he's back home, I guess. I wanted to ask you about the trip in and of itself and what you think is really behind it.
Well, first of all, I think Doug Ford has got a point. The more of us that go down there that have a relationship, we should use it. That's great. It's good that he's doing it, and it's fantastic. If he went to school with J.D. Vance, he might be able to leverage some of this. I think the trick is, though, in what's he saying, and because he hasn't been very friendly about the government's agenda, which is the Canadian agenda. So one hopes that when he's down there, he's supporting what the government's doing, because Donald Trump is a master negotiator. He understands that dividing people is a great way to get what you want. And if he sees just any hint of division in the Canadian position, that's, I don't think, to our advantage. So it's a risk. I think it's a risk worth taking. But, as Francois Philippe Champagne said, the proof will be in the pudding. So.
On balance, James, going into this, he certainly said, I don't purport to represent the Prime Minister, but I would like to help advance these negotiations in any way that I can. He did, though, yesterday, however, to Christy's point, flag like one division around the issue of China. I take the point that the motivation is, perhaps like, I don't know everything about Mr. Jivani, but like, let's take him at his word that he's going there to do the right thing. Trump is the X factor, right? Like if he sees anything, any sort of, weakness in the Canadian Confederation and in unity, I imagine he wouldn't hesitate to exacerbate it.
I think your second point is right, but also I think it's fair to Mr. Jivani to say that the origin story of his engagement in all this was actually a couple months ago, where he offered to try to find a way to work with the Liberal government and to be a useful part of the machinery that the government is putting in place in order to have some rapprochement with the American government. So there's that. But your second point, I think, is entirely true as well. But this is the American government, and certainly on trade files, it's a one-man band. It's President of the United States, and whether it's Secretary Bessent or Secretary Lutnick or others, we try to sort of overanalyze and parse the words of people whose influence is, frankly, I think, pretty marginal. My guess is the President of the United States is all over the road, all over the map. His policies are, frankly, incoherent from day to day. And so the best thing for Canada to do domestically is to do what Stephen Harper talked about on the weekend, what what Prime Minister Carney talked about in Davos, where I think there's a broad Canadian consensus, which is to continue to build out global market access and do the things we need to do to make the country more sturdy domestically. And, if Mr. Jivani has personal relationships and can put a smiling face and a warm handshake and make those connections on a one-by-one basis in the long arc of the Canada-U.S. relationship, that's net positive.
It's interesting because as I was watching all this take place, Marco, this week, I was thinking back to what feels like a very different time, but the same president was there in the first round of NAFTA negotiations, in which a ton of people were employed by the federal government to go and plead Canada's case, right? At all levels of government, all different political stripes, members of the opposition. I remember traveling down to Washington, D.C. to do the same thing. And there was like a big discussion about what Canada's case was. It's very, very closed at this point. It's very, very different. That isn't the norm, which is part of why I think everyone took notice of Mr. Jivani's trip. What do you think about the trip?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And if I'm not mistaken, James Moore, one of our esteemed co-panelists, was part of that bipartisan effort. And to be sure, bipartisan unity at this fragile moment is crucial to international diplomacy. But so too is being coordinated. And I think one of the foundations of successful international diplomacy is not only what the message is and having discipline around that, but who's carrying the message. And that's why countries have established protocols on receiving delegations and recognized officials. And even taking Mr. Jivani at his word, I mean, I'll coin James Moore again. It can't be a one-man show. And so that's why we have the Prime Minister go down and meet with the President. That's why we have trade ministers who meet their counterparts. That's why we have parliamentary delegations, so that there can be coherency, consistency, and credibility and follow-through when it comes to that message. So I think for Jamil, and notwithstanding our political disagreements, we have a cordial relationship. It's about channeling his energy, and what at face value he is saying is a sincere effort to try to help the government navigate these very delicate times.
Yeah, two things about sort of the efforts before also. Like Mr. Jivani, to James's point, Mandy, had said for a while now that he'd been making overtures even directly to the Prime Minister's office to be able to help. On the flip side, if this is a solo mission, he did get briefed, the Prime Minister said, by the minister who oversees trade between our two countries, Dominic LeBlanc. I had Minister Jolie on earlier because Mr. Jivani said he was going to meet with GM today. I asked her if there was any conversation in advance of that meeting, and she said a bunch of stuff, but she also said no, that there hadn't been a conversation, just to give the full picture of all the back and forth. Your thoughts on the trip?
Well, I think it's important that he goes down and tries to leverage that relationship that he has. To me, it only makes sense. And in fact, if he had the relationship and wasn't using it, he'd be criticized for that. So it's important that he do what he can. I take the point that we need to speak with great care to make sure that we're saying the same things, and we don't allow the Americans to exploit differences. But I think the other important point is the fact that he met with senators and governors in border states and things like that. Donald Trump is not going to be president of the United States forever. These trade relations continue on state to province all across the country. And we need to continue to keep those relationships warm, because who knows what will happen after the midterm elections. Not immediately clear that Donald Trump will still be president. He might not be. Who knows? It's certainly conceivable that Congress could act against him and make life very difficult for him. So let's keep all those relationships warm. And if Jamil has a special relationship with J.D. Vance, by all means, let's use it.